Story 1. She thought the man was outside watching her through the glass. What she didn't realize was that she was staring at his reflection. It was pouring rain that Tuesday night in Millbrook when we got the call from Margaret Chen, an 83-year-old woman living alone on Cypress Avenue. She was convinced there was a ghost in her house. I'd been a patrol officer for 6 years at that point, and I'd heard it all. But something about her voice made me sit up straighter. She wasn't hysterical. She was terrified in that quiet, genuine way that makes your instincts scream. "I keep hearing footsteps upstairs," she told the dispatcher. "But I live alone. I know it sounds crazy, but there's something in my house." My partner Jake Martinez and I were 3 minutes out when the call escalated. Margaret was still on the line with dispatch when her voice dropped to a whisper. "There's a man," she said, "standing in my backyard. He's staring at me through the sliding glass door." The dispatcher kept her on the line. Margaret described him, tall, wearing dark clothes, completely motionless, just standing there in the rain, staring at her through the glass. She froze in her living room, unable to move, unable to look away. After about 90 seconds, the man took off running. We arrived 12 minutes after the initial call. I stayed with Margaret in the foyer while Jake went around back to search the yard. The rain had picked up, turning everything into mud and darkness. Margaret was shaking. She kept apologizing for calling us, saying she felt foolish. "My eyes aren't what they used to be," she said. "Maybe I imagined it." Jake came back inside, shaking his head. No footprints, no sign of anyone. The rain probably washed everything away. We decided to do a quick sweep before leaving, just to give her peace of mind. In the living room, the room with the sliding glass door, there was a trail of mud, fresh mud, footprints leading from the hallway, stopping right behind where Margaret had been standing. I felt my skin go cold. "Ma'am," I asked carefully, "have you been outside today? Did anyone visit?" "No, dear. No one comes to visit anymore." Jake and I looked at each other. Margaret had very poor eyesight. She'd been hard of hearing her whole life, even worse now at her age. That's when it hit me. The man she saw through the glass door, she'd been seeing his reflection. He hadn't been standing in the backyard at all. He'd been standing right behind her in the living room while she talked to dispatch. She'd been staring at him for over 2 minutes, and he'd been staring back just a few feet away. When she said he ran off, he'd actually just walked out the front door, calmly, like he had all the time in the world. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken. We never figured out what he wanted or how long he'd been in that house before she noticed the footsteps upstairs. The thing that still bothers me? Those muddy footprints in her living room. They circled her favorite chair, multiple times. Like he'd been walking around her while she watched TV, and she never knew. We installed new locks and a security system for her the next day. She moved in with her nephew 2 weeks later, said she couldn't sleep in that house anymore. I don't blame her. I still think about those circling footprints. How many times had he been there before? How long had he been watching her? Some questions don't have answers, and maybe that's worse than knowing. Story 2. For weeks, she thought her house was haunted. The truth was worse. Someone was living above her while she slept. I worked dispatch for the Riverside County Police Department for 5 years right out of college. One night in November, around 2:47 a.m., I got a call that still gives me chills. 911, what's your emergency? Is this the police? The woman's voice was shaking, her breathing rapid and shallow. Yes, ma'am, what's your emergency? There's someone in my house. She paused and I heard her take a trembling breath. I think it's a ghost. I sat up straight, already typing the address into the system. Her name was Patricia Gomez, 42 years old, living on Oakmont Drive. Ma'am, are you in a safe location right now? I'm in my bedroom. I locked the door, but I can hear it. I can hear something moving in the other room. I know this sounds insane, but there's something here. I dispatched 2 units immediately. Sergeant Davis came on the radio asking why I'd sent multiple cars without explanation. Sir, caller reports an intruder. She believes it's paranormal in nature, but she's hearing movement in her home. Silence on the radio for a solid minute, then 10-4. I kept Patricia on the line. She described hearing footsteps, doors opening and closing, sounds coming from her kitchen and living room. It's been happening for almost a week, she whispered. Every night, always around 3 a.m. The officers arrived 8 minutes later. Patricia came out of her bedroom, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, I know how this sounds, but it's real, I swear it's real. Officer Chen told me later that her sincerity actually unnerved them. They drew their weapons and cleared the house room by room. Even they felt scared, he admitted. They found nothing. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. Nothing. Patricia seemed embarrassed but relieved. We filed the report and the officers left. 3 nights later she called back. This time I was working a night shift, and when I dispatched units to her address again, Sergeant Davis immediately recognized it. "The ghost house," he said over the radio. Officer Chen responded again. He called me directly from the scene 20 minutes later. "We found someone," he said quietly. "What?" "There's a man in her attic. He's been living up there." The man's name was Trevor Phillips, 34, homeless for about 8 months. He'd been climbing through a loose attic vent on cold nights, sleeping in the insulation, and climbing back out before dawn. Patricia's house was well insulated, warm, and she lived alone. The footsteps she heard, him moving around at night while she slept. The doors, he'd been coming downstairs to use her bathroom and get water from her kitchen. He'd been there for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. Officer Chen said the man was huddled in the corner of the attic, wearing torn clothes, looking terrified himself. They didn't charge him. What he needed was help, not a record. They got him into a shelter program. But here's what still bothers me. Patricia said the sounds started a week before her first call. That means Trevor had been in her house every night for at least 3 weeks before she called us. 3 weeks of a stranger living above her bedroom, listening to her TV shows, hearing her phone conversations, watching her through the attic access in her hallway. Patricia moved out 2 months later. She told Officer Chen she couldn't stay there anymore. Every creak, every sound, she'd never know if it was just the house settling or something else. I don't blame her one bit. Sometimes I wonder how many other people hear ghost sounds and never call. How many empty attics aren't really empty. Story 3. They buried him, but he kept showing up at crime scenes, and every time they saw him, he looked more dead than before. My uncle Robert Sandoval was sheriff of a small town called Mesa Springs in New Mexico for almost 30 years. He was the most no-nonsense person in our family. Former military, straight-laced, never told jokes or exaggerated stories. So when he told us what happened with Dennis Harper, we all believed him without question. Dennis Harper, everyone called him Harp, was a local journalist who covered police activity for the Mesa Springs Gazette. He'd show up at every major incident, car accidents, fires, anything worth reporting. He monitored the police scanner religiously. Everyone on the force knew Harp. He was there at least twice a week, notebook in hand, asking questions. He had this nervous habit of flicking people behind the ear, just a little tap with his finger. People would swat at it thinking it was a bug, then turn around to see Harp grinning. Annoying? Sure, but everyone liked him. Then Harp got diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer. He deteriorated fast, 3 months from diagnosis to the end. His wife Linda buried him at Mesa Springs Cemetery, even though Harp had specifically wanted to be cremated. Family drama, my uncle said. Linda won. That's when things got strange. About a week after the funeral, reports started coming in. Civilians, other officers, all claiming they'd seen Harp at accident scenes, standing at the edge of the police tape, watching. 20, maybe 30 reports in 2 weeks. My uncle dismissed it. Grief makes people see things, he said. Mass hysteria. Then it happened to him. He and my Aunt Carla were at our house one night when they showed up, pale, shaking, my uncle's service weapon drawn. I'd never seen him rattled. Not once in my entire life. We sat him down. My aunt was crying. Uncle Robert had to compose himself before he could even speak. Carla and I were watching TV, he started. I kept scratching at my ear, couldn't figure out why it kept itching. I asked him what was wrong, my aunt added, her voice trembling. He turned to look at me, and that's when I saw the bedroom door opening. Harp was standing there, my uncle said flatly, clear as day, wearing the same clothes from his funeral viewing. My aunt nodded. We both saw him. Robert jumped up, started shouting, and Harp just smiled. Then he walked across the living room and went out the front door. Closed it behind him like he was leaving after a visit. My uncle ran outside, weapon drawn, searching the yard, the street, nothing, no one. They stayed at our house that night. Neither of them slept. At the station the next morning, the other officers gave my uncle hell. We told you so, they said. But he couldn't deny it anymore. For the next 3 months, reports kept coming in. Harp showing up at accident scenes, fires, domestic disturbances. Always the same, standing at the periphery, watching, never speaking. My dad saw him too. He and his friend were developing photos in our basement darkroom when they both felt something tap the back of their ears. They turned around. Harp was standing in the corner, barely visible in the red light, grinning that familiar grin. They ran upstairs so fast my dad nearly broke his ankle. But here's the disturbing part. As the weeks went on, people said Harp looked worse. The reports got more specific. His skin looked gray, his clothes looked dirty, torn, his face looked wrong. My uncle saw him 2 more times. Both times he said Harp looked increasingly deteriorated, his hair was falling out, his skin looked sunken. My dad had a theory that I still think about. Harp was decomposing in his grave, and whatever was showing up was reflecting that process. The sightings stopped around the 4-month mark. Just stopped. No more reports. Nothing. My aunt and uncle eventually moved to Arizona. My uncle retired early. He never talked about it again after that year, but I saw the way he'd look over his shoulder sometimes, the way he'd flinch when something touched his ear. I still get chills when my ear itches, every single time. Story 4. The door was open, the snow was untouched, and the house was definitely not empty. I worked as a patrol officer in a small town called Fairfield in rural Nebraska back in the late 90s. We had several abandoned houses scattered around town, but one particular house on the corner of Elm and Baker Street kept attracting copper thieves. The department told us to keep an eye on it during our rounds. It was January, middle of a cold snap, snow everywhere. I was doing my evening patrol around 7 p.m. when I drove past the house. It sat on a corner lot, so I had a clear view of all 4 sides. Everything looked normal. Front door closed, back door closed, no tracks in the snow. 2 hours later, I drove by again. The back door was wide open. I stopped the car and stared at it. I absolutely knew that door had been closed 2 hours ago. I looked at the snow around the house. No footprints, not a single track leading to or from that door. Just pristine, undisturbed snow. I radioed dispatch. This is Unit 7, investigating an open door at the Elm Street property, requesting county backup. I got out, flashlight in hand, and approached the back door. The house had been gutted by scrappers over the years, plaster walls torn down, debris everywhere, copper wiring stripped out. I shined my light inside. Dust covered everything. Thick dust, the kind that shows every footprint, every disturbance. There were no footprints in that dust. None except the ones I was about to make. I was ready to chalk it up to wind or a faulty latch when I heard it. A loud thump from upstairs. Then what sounded exactly like children laughing. "Police department," I shouted. "Come downstairs now." More sounds from upstairs. Movement. What I swear were kids playing, running around. I told dispatch it sounded like children were in the house. I started making my way through the kitchen toward the living room where the staircase was. The whole time I kept checking the main floor, every room, every corner. Nothing. I heard the sounds 2 more times. Running, playing, but no response to my announcements. Then it went quiet. I headed upstairs. The second floor had a small hallway with 3 bedrooms, one on the right, one straight ahead, one on the left. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard another thump in the left bedroom. I carefully looked around the corner. Empty room. Small pile of plaster and wood debris in the middle. And sitting on top of that pile, like someone had carefully placed it there, was a torn page from a children's book. The picture on the page showed a police officer in uniform, smiling, holding a child's hand. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I cleared the other rooms as fast as I could and got out of that house. I radioed dispatch. No one found inside. Securing the property now. I locked that back door and never went inside again. County deputies drove by the next morning. The door was open again. No footprints in the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. The town eventually demolished that house about 3 years later. The demolition crew said they found children's drawings on the walls of the upstairs bedrooms. Drawings that hadn't been visible under all that plaster and grime. I still don't know what I heard that night, but I know one thing for certain. Those sounds weren't wind. And that book page didn't place itself on that pile. Some houses hold on to things, and maybe some things don't want to let go. Story 5. A disconnected phone line called 911 3 times. It led police to someone who had been dead for months. My Uncle Frank worked dispatch for our county for almost 20 years. He told us this story at a family dinner, and the way he told it, quiet, matter-of-fact, made it even more unsettling. About 4 years ago, he received a call from a landline at 11:47 p.m. He answered it the way he always did. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Static, just static." He waited a few seconds, then disconnected. Wrong number, he figured. Happens all the time. 3 minutes later, the same number called back. Same thing, nothing but static on the other end. He tried talking into it. "Hello, can you hear me? If this is an emergency, press a button or make a sound." Nothing, just that hollow static. He traced the number to an address on Birch Lane, an older neighborhood on the east side of town. He made a note of it and disconnected again. When the same number called a third time 10 minutes later, my uncle made a decision. He dispatched a unit to do a welfare check. Officers Reynolds and Martinez were closest. They pulled up to the address around 12:20 a.m., a small dark house set back from the street. No lights on inside, no car in the driveway. They knocked, no answer. They walked around the perimeter, checking windows. Everything looked undisturbed, but something felt off. Martinez said later that the smell hit them before they even opened the door. They found it unlocked. The person inside had been deceased for almost 5 months. The medical examiner estimated time based on decomposition. 5 months. An elderly man named Howard Price, 81 years old, no family. No regular visitors. He'd passed away in his recliner watching TV. But here's what made my uncle's skin crawl. When the utility company came to check the records, they confirmed that electricity had been shut off to that house 4 months prior due to non-payment. No power, no working phone line. The landline should have been completely dead. The phone company verified their records too. That number hadn't been active for months. Physically impossible for it to place a call. Yet my uncle's system logged 3 incoming calls from that exact number at those exact times that night. The recordings are still in the county archives. 3 calls, static on all of them. If those calls hadn't come through, Howard Price might have stayed in that chair for years. The house was paid off. No mortgage company to come checking, no family to wonder, just an empty house on a quiet street. My uncle said he couldn't explain it and he didn't try to. He's not a spiritual person. He deals in facts, evidence, protocols. But he kept the call logs printed in his desk drawer for years. Sometimes the world makes exceptions, he told us. I asked him if he ever got calls from that number again. He said no, just those 3 calls, that one night, just enough to bring Howard home. Story 6. The neighbor said she was talking to demons. She was really just talking to everyone she had ever lost. My dad served as a police officer for 25 years before retiring. Most of his stories were routine stuff, traffic stops, domestic disputes, the occasional drunk and disorderly. But there was one call he got early in his career that changed how he saw the world. He was about 2 years on the force when he got dispatched to an apartment building on Riverside Avenue. A woman named Judith, mid-30s, had called to report that her neighbor in apartment 4B had made a pact with the devil. My dad knocked on Judith's door first. She answered immediately, nervous and fidgety. Deeply religious, you could tell from the crosses on every wall, the Bible verses framed in the hallway. She talks to demons, Judith said, pointing at the door across the hall. I hear her every night. Multiple voices. She's possessed or she's summoning something. I don't know, but something is very wrong in there. My dad thanked her and walked across to apartment 4B. Before he could even knock, the door opened. An elderly woman stood there, maybe 75 years old, bright smile on her face. Oh, hello, come in, come in. She didn't ask why he was there, didn't seem concerned about a police officer at her door. She just welcomed him inside like he was an old friend. The apartment was frozen in time furniture from the 1960 seconds, floral wallpaper, photographs in dusty frames. She offered him coffee, asked about his day, told him about the weather. And that's when my dad noticed. She wasn't just talking to him. She'd turn to her left and say something like, "Don't you think so, Margaret?" Then pause, as if listening, and laugh at a response only she could hear. "Thomas, pass me that sugar bowl, would you?" She'd say to the empty air beside the kitchen counter. My dad sat there for 20 minutes, watching her have full conversations with people who weren't there. She'd laugh at jokes he couldn't hear. She'd turn and respond to comments from empty chairs. He wrote down the names she used: Margaret, Thomas, David, James, Catherine, Robert. When he got back to the station, he looked her up in the system. Her name was Eleanor Price. Her records went back decades. He pulled her family history. Margaret, her daughter, deceased 15 years. Thomas, her eldest son, deceased 22 years. David, her younger son, deceased 8 years. James, her brother, deceased 31 years. Catherine, her sister, deceased 12 years. Robert, her husband, deceased 19 years. She was alone, completely alone. No living relatives, no friends. Her groceries were delivered. She rarely left her apartment. My dad went back the next day, off duty, just to check on her, and the day after that, and the next week. Pretty soon, my sister and I were going with him. We'd sit in her living room and talk to her. She taught me how to make her famous chocolate chip cookies. She taught my sister how to knit. And over time, something changed. She stopped talking to people who weren't there. The invisible conversations faded. She started talking to us instead. She just needed people, real people, living people. For 19 years, my dad looked after her. We all did. She became like a grandmother to us. When it got harder for her to live alone, she moved into our guest room. She passed away at 94, peacefully, in our house, surrounded by actual family. My dad said later that it was one of the most important calls he ever took. Sometimes protect and serve means just showing up, he told me. Just being present, just giving a damn. Judith from across the hall. She moved out 3 months after my dad's first visit. She never knew what really happened. Never knew that the demons Eleanor was talking to were just the ghosts of everyone she'd lost. I think about Eleanor sometimes, how close she came to dying alone in that apartment, talking to people who'd been gone for decades. All it took was someone willing to listen, someone willing to come back. Story 7. He said he killed a ghost to protect himself. The terrifying part, he truly believed it. My father worked patrol in a small town in Georgia for over 30 years. This happened during a cold snap in January, one of those rare southern winters where everything freezes solid and people aren't prepared for it. He and his partner, Officer Williams, got a call around 9:30 p.m. about screaming coming from a property on Old Mill Road. When they arrived, they found a man sitting on the front porch, holding a double-sided wood-splitting axe. Steam was rising off the grass, thick, visible steam in the cold air. There were chunks scattered across the lawn. The man's name was Dale Tucker, 46 years old, with a long history of psychiatric episodes and multiple involuntary commitments. He saw my father and Williams pull up and he just smiled. "Y'all hear about the haint?" he asked calmly. "Sir, we need you to put the axe down," my father said. Dale looked at the axe like he'd forgotten he was holding it. "Oh, this. I don't need this no more. The haint's gone now." "What haint, Dale?" "The one that was cheating me. We was playing poker, see, and I kept losing. Every hand. Didn't make no sense. Then I realized he wasn't no regular person. He was a haint, a ghost. That's how he was cheating me." My father's eyes went to the steam rising from the grass, to the chunks scattered around the yard. "Dale, where's your friend?" "I told you, he was a haint. You can't let haints cheat you. They'll take everything. So I chased him out here, and I made sure he couldn't cheat nobody else ever again." My father's partner started walking the yard with his flashlight. The chunks were pieces of a human body. The steam was coming from blood still warm hitting the frozen ground. They found the victim's torso near the back fence. His head was in the bushes near the porch. The rest of him was scattered across the property. Dale had literally hacked his friend, a man named Curtis Webb, into dozens of pieces. The entire time Dale just sat there on that porch, calm as could be, explaining how you can't trust haints, how they'll trick you, how he'd done the right thing. That's when my father had an idea. "Dale," he said, "my police car is haint-proof." Dale's eyes lit up. Yeah, they make them special. Haints can't get inside police cars. You'll be safe in there." Dale practically leaped off that porch. He dropped the axe and sprinted to the patrol car, jumping in the back seat. "Thank you," he kept saying. "Thank you for helping me. I knew y'all would understand." He never resisted, never fought. He was so relieved to be in that haint-proof car that he cooperated completely. The crime scene took 6 hours to process. They found pieces of Curtis in the bushes, in the driveway, under the porch. Dale had been methodical, thorough. Curtis Webb was 52 years old. He had a wife and 2 kids. He'd stopped by Dale's house to check on him because Dale had missed a doctor's appointment earlier that day. Curtis was his caseworker. Dale is in a psychiatric facility now, probably will be for the rest of his life. My father testified at his hearing, said Dale genuinely believed Curtis was a supernatural entity trying to harm him. But here's what my father never forgot. When they were processing the scene, one of the techs found something in Dale's pocket. A poker hand, 5 cards, a royal flush. Curtis hadn't been cheating at all. Dale had won that final hand. And that's when he'd decided Curtis was a ghost. Story 8. The lights wouldn't stay off. Something followed him, and whatever touched him wasn't human. I started working as a security guard about 3 years ago. One of my first assignments was the graveyard shift at a new housing development outside of town, Pine Ridge Estates. 8 model homes, a temporary sales office, and about 40 lots in various stages of construction. The pay was good, the work was easy. Just patrol the neighborhood, make sure no one was stealing copper or vandalizing the properties. The first night went fine. I walked through each model home, turned off all the lights and TVs, locked up and did my rounds every hour. Standard stuff. The second night, things started getting strange. I was in the 4th model home, a 3-bedroom colonial-style house, walking through the kitchen. I heard a distinct click, and all the kitchen lights went out. Not a power surge, the appliances were still running, the little green indicator lights under the switches were still on, just the overhead lights. I checked the breaker, nothing tripped. I flipped the switch, nothing happened. Then a few minutes later another click, the lights came back on. I heard the same clicking sound from the next house over. I looked out the window and saw that house, the 5th model home, was completely dark. By the time I walked next door, the lights were back on. But the TV was off, sitting in standby mode. The only way to get it into standby is by pressing the button on the front panel. I turned around and looked out the window at the 2nd and 3rd model homes. Every light in both houses was on. I had turned them all off 20 minutes earlier. The 3rd night was worse. Lights started turning on and off as I entered rooms. I'd walk into a kitchen and the lights would shut off behind me. I'd hear clicking sounds upstairs, and when I'd go up, half the lights I'd turned off would be back on. In one house, a desk lamp turned itself back on 3 times. I'd turn it off, walk away, and hear the click. I'd turn around, and it would be on again. In another house, a lamp with a dimmer switch started slowly brightening on its own while I was standing right there, just gradually getting brighter and brighter, like someone was turning the dial. I radioed my supervisor. "Is there any kind of timer system in these houses?" "No timers," he said. "Everything's manual." "Why?" I didn't want to sound crazy, so I just said I was having electrical issues and kept patrolling. Then I saw the dog. I was walking past one of the construction sites around 1:30 a.m. when something caught my eye near the porta potty. At first I thought it was a skunk, small, black, low to the ground. It walked behind the porta potty. When it came back out, it looked different, bigger, like a black Shih Tzu. I stopped walking and just stared. It changed again, right in front of me. Suddenly it looked like a Doberman, then a bloodhound, then some kind of tan mastiff. Finally it shifted into a yellow lab and ran off into the darkness. I stood there for a solid minute, not believing what I'd just seen. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the shadows were playing tricks. I don't know. But what happened next I can't explain. I was walking back to the sales office around 2:30 a.m. I glanced up at one of the finished houses on my right. Something hit me, hard, right between my left pec and shoulder, hard enough to stagger me sideways. I weigh 250 pounds, and whatever hit me physically moved me. It felt exactly like someone walking the opposite direction on a sidewalk had shoved past me, that solid physical pressure. I spun around. No one was there. No one was anywhere near me. I stood there under the streetlight, breathing hard, looking at the empty street around me. Nothing. I radioed my supervisor and told him I was ending my shift early. He asked if I was okay. I said yes, but I needed off this site. I never went back to Pine Ridge Estates. I requested reassignment, and thankfully, my supervisor didn't ask too many questions. The development finished construction about 8 months later. Families moved in. As far as I know, no one's reported anything unusual. But I still wonder about those lights, about that dog that kept changing shape, about whatever hit me on that empty street. Some places feel wrong, and Pine Ridge felt wrong from the second night on. I don't care if it sounds crazy. I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and I'm never going back. Well, those were tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and let me know in the comments which one got to you the most. I'll see you soon with more stories.